Hi, I'm Jeff Nyquist with another edition of Friends and Enemies. We're going to have an interesting discussion today about the meaning of things like outlawing the communist or Nazi parties in a country, freedom of speech. What is the composition of the modern state? We talk about democracies, we talk about a liberal democracy or liberalism, we talk about, of course, conservatism, and what is the state's role in safeguarding society from enemies, internal and domestic? How do you define an enemy, an internal enemy? What parties do you make illegal or illegal? Should any parties be illegal? And we have an interesting discussion because um, I'm in the United States and my co-host Alex Benesch is in Germany. And in Germany, the communist and Nazi parties are illegal. In the United States, it's not so much. The Communist Party has been illegal here at times. So it's rather intriguing. And the nature of the system of checks and balances or representative democracy, there's different ways of characterizing this very complex political formation that modern states are made out of. And there's many people that think that these states are failing, that the United States is approaching being a failed state. Look at the deficits, the way they spend money. Look at the Trump and the Biden administrations, both of them having severe problems and now stuck in this war that nobody really wanted through misjudgments. You have the debate whether populism is a good thing or, people. As H.L. Mencken said, democracy is a system where the people get what they want and they get it good and hard. I tend to look at the long run of history to see that there is a number of red flags here. But Alex, why don't you explain your idea about the Communist Party and being illegal and how it's worked for Germany? And I mean, Germany is really riven right now, just like the U.S. is. Our societies are similar in many ways. But in this, they're different. The Communist Party is illegal. Has that really stopped the subversion of the left? And given the rise of the new right-wing party in Germany, is it really stopping fascism? Or would it be fair to say that the alternative for Deutschland is fascist or neo-fascist?
So yeah, it's like when standard political science hits a brick wall, and we have to look deeper into the intelligence side of it, because why would anybody be honest out there, right? Why would the guy who just tried to as far as we can tell, from the evidence, allegedly, whatever. The guy that just allegedly tried to kill the president of the United States, and that guy, he had some sort of a manifesto or something that he posted, and he explicitly said that I wasn't being honest to people around me. He apologized, if I remember correctly, to everybody he deceived, because he didn't tell anybody what he was about to do, right? So why would anybody be honest if they have a goal like an assassination, which is classic Marxist-Leninist strategy? I mean, even if he had succeeded in shooting someone,
or anarchists like to shoot. We had a problem in the 1890s in various countries with anarchists shooting people.
Exactly.
Right?
So if this guy had actually succeeded, I mean, obviously this wouldn't have immediately changed the country. This wouldn't have caused an immediate, communist takeover or whatever. But this is kind of the Leninist strategy, what they call the struggle. You do an assassination, the government overreacts, and then this broader communist movement, they create this outrage because the government overreacts, and the government starts to arrest people and crack down on people and all that. And then there's another assassination, or there's a hostage taking. We had this huge problem in Germany, or West Germany, in the Cold War, when communist terrorists that had huge numbers of supporters in the population, like millions of people who really liked them or thought they were kind of good. They would hijack airplanes and would try to force the government into releasing comrades out of prison, or they would, they would attack anything to do with Israel, or they would grab somebody off the street, somebody who is famous politician or somewhat, influential, was a target. They would grab him when nobody was quite securing this person, grab him, throw him in the back of a trunk, have some sort of mock trial on camera, just like Al Qaeda did or these Muslim groups did, and have this person on camera confess to his sins, and then they try again to get comrades out of prison, or else they will kill the hostage, and then they do kill the hostage, or just a clever attack when the target person's car stops at a red light. They would do a drive-by shooting, or they had this idea of these pressure cooker bombs, like this magnetic pot with the lid on, right? So this is a bomb that is magnetic, and you can just put it on top of the target person's car, and it's a shaped charging device. So most of the explosive force will go downward, killing everybody in the car. So this is Leninism. They would do this over and over and over again. And then, of course, they try to have help from outside of the country. So this is kind of like what they do. Now, the guy who just tried to, with the Washington dinner, try to attack that with firearms, he wasn't honest about what he was going to do to his surrounding. He was a smart guy, high IQ. I think he had a degree from Caltech, and he was he could make really good money. I think if you went to Caltech, you have a starting salary afterwards of $116,000 and very little student debt. I mean, my initial list of questions included the question: was he drowning in student debt? Maybe he was drowning in student debt. Maybe he was going crazy. But there's a lot of people who are drowning in student debt, and they're going crazy. There's people that can't pay rent. They're going crazy. They can't afford to live. They're going crazy. And the propaganda tells them it's because of lack of communism. And they're not just hating on the president. They're not just hating on elements of the system. They're hating the bourgeoisie. It's still the same thing as always. They just call it the boomers. I mean, they call everybody a boomer who is like older than 50. I mean, sometimes even people call me boomer. And they said, oh yeah, okay, boomer. And like, I'm a millennial. Right? So it's like hatred.
No, I'm a boomer. I'm a boomer, but you got to be really old, to be a boomer. But the thing is what these younger people don't realize in saying these things is they don't realize the length of experience. My parents grew up in the Depression. My great-grandparents were the World War I generation. So a lot of the kids I went to school with, their dads fought in World War II. So I knew all kinds of people from a very young age who fought in the war. I had teachers, elementary school teachers, who had fought in World War II and World War I. So it's kind of a strange thing when you see these younger people and this newer experience and the way people talk now. They don't understand this is not the way people talked 50 years ago. This isn't the way things were. This is so different. And one point I will make is that in a lot of ways, our society is pathological. And what I mean by that is that there are things that are not sustainable that we're doing that we think are normal now. like the behavior between men and women that has been normalized, and the pathological economic optimism, like there's never going to be a depression, and the pathological optimism that there's not going to be another big war. There will be another big war. There will be millions dead, and crying over losing 13 people in a war will seem entirely silly, because when millions are dead, and it's going to be really bad because we got 8 billion people on the planet. We've got a grand solar minimum coming. The fertilizer is too expensive. I know farmers, the diesel went up this past week, $1 a gallon, and even a small farm can use 35 It's unbelievable. 35,000 gallons of diesel. That's $35,000 more of expense for that farm. And then with fertilizer going up, farmers aren't planting. So what happens when there's no food? What happens when farms go belly up? Everything becomes corporate. We've got all kinds of pathologies here
Yeah, but
going on.
when there's a war or a larger war, this is when a system can sort of stabilize itself, right? This is what kind of the classic Anglo thing. When you had the British society, let's say the British society during World War One, World War Two, very very divided. You still had the king and the aristocracy and the class society that wasn't really working because it was not really a meritocracy. It was not really okay. These people know what they're doing. Lots of craziness in high places. Had Lord Louis Mountbatten, and his shenanigans. In his private life and that sort of stuff. And then of course you had massive communist movements.
You're describing Great Britain as it evolved into socialism after World War II. The
Yeah,
the
but
war, see, there's two differences between the United States and Britain. Let me just make this point. Great Britain adopted a form of socialist economy during World War II, and they didn't leave it after the war. Um, so Churchill was voted out, and they had basically a socialist government. And they had clear into the 1950s. They were still rationing things, right, like they were during the
yeah,
war. In the United States, you had the New Deal, which was very socialistic, imposed on the United States, so businesses couldn't function. But the opposite happened in the United States. During the war, they repealed the New Deal very quietly because a corporation said, we can't make all these tanks, guns, and bombs with these regulations on us. You have to lift these regulations. So they did. And so after the war, America was less socialistic than before the war. And then we boomed, whereas Britain collapsed. So it was two different versions of what
hmm
happened. And of course, when you talk about Louis Mountbatten and opportunity in British society, when Britain was practicing capitalism, there is no such thing as a pure meritocracy. They had a class society, but it worked very well. Britain became the most powerful country in the world for 2 centuries. They were a world power. I wouldn't say their society didn't work very well. I think it worked really well. It was a model for many people. The French admired it. The French that were smart, they wanted that system for themselves. The French just could never implement the British system for themselves. The French Revolution miscarried. And we know from Burke's reflections on the revolution in France why. They did not tradition to the extent that Burke said, look, it's the imagination, the moral imagination, which gives us the clothing, the beautiful clothing that we clothe everything, because a lot of reality is ugly. And we need to beautify, to love your country. Your country must be beautiful, worth loving. So you want to beautify your country. You want good things. And this comes out of the imagination and the way you order your society. Um,
yeah. Isn't it
the,
strange
the
that
French
is
the French
it,
tried rationalism and it didn't work.
but isn't it strange how the socialist movement uh, became so relevant in the British Empire? Because it's like when you look at the Labour Party, when you look at the Fabian the Fabian Society, I mean, maybe there was some ill-guided attempt in the British establishment to say maybe we can have like a controlled space, where people can feel like they're represented with their strange, stupid socialist ideas, but we're gonna keep this under control. But that didn't really work out, and it's like the British Empire was really good at detecting criminal conspiracies or foreign operations on British soil. They had all these not just domestically on these islands. When the Catholics tried to get back at them, or the French operations against the British throne, but also in the colonies. Because it wasn't just the people in India or at times people in China trying to conspire against British colonial rule. It was also other European powers trying to control the same colony. So there was constant pressure for intelligence and counterintelligence to make it all work. But somehow the socialist movement, the socialist movement, was able to gain a foothold
Well,
in the British Empire.
you're maybe aware of Gustav Le Bon. He wrote he's more famous for writing the Crowd, this crowd psychology book. He wrote The Psychology of Revolutions and the Psychology of Socialism, and he basically said that socialism is like a mind virus, and that it is inevitable because it appeals exactly to the masses in a mass age to what they want, and of course it's all bogus. It's not, you can't have that. It's a poisonous. It's a virus. It's going to kill a lot of other things in the body. So he said it's inevitable that it's going to spread everywhere. And he wrote this, in the late 19th century, early 20th century. He wrote these books, and he said that it will reach the point where it's basically almost killed or destroyed society. Socialism will advance to that point, and when the negative impact, the full cost of socialism comes home, it will then be reviled and pushed back. And the virus, there'll be an autoimmune reaction. But what he said is he said France had succumbed to socialism in his time. The socialist mentality was already entrenched in France back then. He said Britain and the United States had resistance to it. And I forgot what he said about Germany. I think he said Germany also had a certain susceptibility. But I think we have all advanced. We don't realize how far all societies have advanced to socialism. Most of this massive deficit in the United States, for example, that we now know we are past, they're already, all the alarms have triggered, we're past the point of no return. That is, we're going to have a collapse now because we can't go along with with this much further. The interest on the debt is greater than our defense budget. So this is just eating us alive. And of course, where is most of it coming from? Social welfare payments, taking care of people. And it's a nice thought to take care of everybody, but really the state never existed for that. The state existed for defense of the society, not to feed and clothe and give housing and health services to everybody. But it's become that, and it's bankrupted the state. So this poison it advances to the point where it collapses. And then we end up going back to some form of authoritarian, well, we call it authoritarianism, but really all societies, the leadership is authoritative. That is, I say this, okay, you don't, we hang you. We enforce the laws, absolutely, sanguinary enforcement, in fact. And how did society become law-abiding? Well, it was so bad in the early 18th century, they started hanging people in large numbers, and in Great Britain, deporting them to Australia. And it cleaned up the roads, the robbers on the roads, and the society became quite orderly. And you had this lawless period in the United States. You had in the wild West. There's lots of stories about the Wild West, especially in the California Gold Rush. You go to where I lived in the North Coast of California. Man, the stories of the robbing and the murdering that went on when there's no law and order. But basically, it was Christian principles spread throughout. You have these Christian revivals, the Methodist movement in Great Britain. You had revivals before the American Revolution in the United States. You had this very serious religious element, which Christopher Lasch, in his book The Revolt of the Elites, says is the major factor that he attributes to the decline in morality and social order here in the West. He was writing that in the 1990s. Boy, what he would say today now. It is a dismal sight what has happened. We're going through a period of internal disorder because of disorder in the mind, in the soul and in the mind. There's disorder in there. And there's an attempt on some level of reordering, but what's really bad is intellectual decay. loss of reading. We're no longer a literate society, as Neil Postman said. People, when they go to church, they're not following what it was that both my grandfathers were ministers in evangelical churches. They wouldn't recognize most of these today Christians as Christians, which is kind of shocking. I mean, I see it and I go, "Oh wow, that's bad." And these people all think they're Christians. They don't seem to understand how much things have changed. If you were alive during the period, you could see it with your own eyes. But if you are actually tracking history, you realize that this is an ongoing thing in history. There's ups and downs. It swings to be very permissive, and then society, it tightens up. What accompanies that are depressions and wars.
Yeah, so when a system tries to deal with what's been called a virus, it's like if you follow up on that comparison, with an epidemic or a pandemic, right? There's containment. Okay, so there's like different things you can do to stop the spread, or like a fire, you start trying to put out fire and stop it from spreading. So there are different ways to try to do that, and I think the British, they sort of went with this idea that we can create our own controlled socialist realm, and so then we control it, right? So this is kind of like how the Labour Party, a lot of important people with the British Labour Party, they were members of the Privy Council, the King's Privy Council, the Fabian Society, the Fabians, they had the important people. They were really from a wealthy background, and they had sometimes ties to British imperialism, and so this was maybe like an attempt at creating a controlled realm, which is something that you cannot really control. And there may be something like this going on partially in the United States. When you look at the Democratic Party and some of the big money that goes around when there's a presidential election, you need like $1 billion in donations to pay for the commercials and to pay for that campaign. And the Democrats are happy to take money from big banks and corporations like that. And then we have strange things like Joe Biden. Joe Biden and his family, they've been made by an old money dynasty that's traditionally been very Republican, which is the DuPont dynasty. French origin, came to the U.S. very early, had like the connection to, I think it was Thomas Jefferson, and they made gunpowder, and then they made other things, became this huge entity, and the DuPont family, they're like aristocrats. There's like 1,500 of them. Why would they finance Joe Biden's career and Joe Biden's other family members' careers? And it's like, was there sort of like an attempt to have a controlled left in the U.S., and this plan went horribly wrong because you can't really control it that way? And now it seems to be fully out of control. When a guy who's smart didn't announce his plans to shoot the president, he was posting what everybody else is posting on the left on the web, and then he does this recon, the location, the targets, figures out security is weak, and he tries to do this thing. So how many Oswalds are running around? How many Lee Harvey Oswalds are actually running around? And they have a completely different idea of what's supposed to happen. Now, so besides trying a controlled left, just paying for the leaders of a movement and surveilling the movement, that's like one attempt to keep control. The other thing is the FBI, the FBI, the NSA, that sort of thing, where you just treat this problem like, counterterrorism, right? Just straight counterterrorism. And you do investigations and criminal investigations. And there's like this relationship between the NSA and the FBI. So the NSA sort of gives tips to the FBI, and then the FBI can do a quick check of a person, no warrant, just a quick check, and then it magically lines up, and then they can build their own case. So the FBI does not have to. The FBI does not have to say, okay, we got this tip from the NSA and it's legally, questionable, but they can say, we just found these people. So this is something that was done for a while, but then it exploded. You had the Panthers, you had all these KKK groups, you had the Weathermen, and whenever there's groups like this, the grievance cults. This is when we saw a connection with Eastern spy services, the Soviet spy services. They all try to get in on the action, and at some point, the FBI couldn't track these people anymore efficiently enough. So somehow, probably with the Soviet help, these domestic extremist groups, they got more professional. So they figured out who was a snitch, or they wouldn't talk as much among each other. More operational security, better tradecraft, better spycraft, planning operations, secret communications, the whole bit. So then the FBI was under so much pressure, they had to start breaking the law themselves, which was the COINTELPRO programs and sub-programs, because there was literally no other way. And so this has been going on for a long time. Technological spying has gotten better, but what if we have literally millions of potential terrorists running around, or terrorist sympathizers running around? They all want the government dead. They all want to kill the boomers and take their stuff, as if the boomers are the kulaks. This is kind of like from Soviet terminology when they said there's a wealthier class. Anybody who owns anything, anybody who's, this is what they called it in the Soviet Union. These kulaks, they had something. They were the target. They were evil. So they had to be eliminated as a class or outright killed. So now we get the same thing in the West. They're saying, basically, steal from the boomers, or kill the boomers, or kill the government, kill everything.
Well, we have the slogan, eat the rich. We've heard that.
Yeah.
The envy thing is big. People, especially as you get people, don't want to work hard like they used to. I mean, most people who have something, they've worked very hard for it. They've worked very, very hard for it. And so now you have people now who want to work less and have the same amount. And you have people who are borrowing. The Italian historian Guglielmo Ferraro wrote a history of Rome, and he took a tour in 1909 in the United States, where he gave lectures about the history of Rome. And one of his insights from Rome was that all the civil wars in Rome were caused by one generation living better than the next, until you got a generation that lived better by borrowing. And the debt became so huge, the only way out of it was civil war. It was an interesting interpretation that he had. And I haven't examined the data, but I've read his lectures on this. And people asked him at the time in America in 1909, what do you see ahead for us? And he said something very similar to what someone like George F. Will would say, the American conservative commentator who used to be on ABC back in that day as a commentator, and wrote for Newsweek magazine, wrote the opinion piece at the end of Newsweek magazine every week. He basically said that it is this lack of self-control, this desire to have something now, is toxic. And he said it's going to overwhelm your society one day. The British historian William Macaulay, Thomas Macaulay, the Whig historian, what he said was very similar. He was responding to someone who had sent him by a life of Jefferson. And he wrote him back finally. He said, I don't really like Jefferson. And I don't really like what Jefferson did to your Constitution, because Jefferson was our first Democratic president, and he won on this big populist thing, very anti-aristocratic, although he was an aristocrat. Um,
Yeah.
and what Macaulay wrote is, because of Jefferson, your Constitution is all sail and no anchor.
Hmm.
These were the words he used. He said, one day you're going to eat your seed corn, and you're going to, because you're going to try to give things to people. People are going to vote their way into goodies, and then you're not going to be able to take it back, and it's going to destroy you economically. And it was an interesting thing that he said. And I think with George F. Will, I think George F. Will calls it George F. Will's law. And of course, the first law of economics, George F. Will's law, is related to this, is that there's scarcity is normal. You have to work very hard to get something, and abundance is not. But and so that what you need to have a correct relationship between your expenses and what you consume. But if you consume more than that, so he said George F. Will's law was that American politics is all about breaking the first rule of economics, right? Is that there has to be a relationship between consumption and production. And so the politicians are just lying and telling people, oh, you can have this and you can have that and we can pay for this and up it goes until we've got, what is it, 37 trillion dollars in debt.
Hmm.
And that's just the federal debt, not city, state, and local.
Yeah, and so like when the current generation, I mean, I would like to see at some point, or maybe I'll have to do it myself, a scientific breakdown of the younger generation, the younger generations now. The kind of the people that try to assassinate the president multiple times now. They're what are they like? What is the percentage of this and the percentage of that? Because you're always going to have, even in the younger generation, you're always going to have like the high performers, the hard workers, but you're also going to have like the entitlement crowd, and it's like socialist culture. Socialist culture is to me is a culture of individual sabotage, and they will entice people to rebel against the system by not performing in school and not having a real plan. This is when people, when Woodstock happened, the big festival, there was crews with cameras and microphones going around interviewing these young hippies, and they were asking them, what do you do for a living? What's your life like? And they got answers along the lines of, I just am, I just exist. I'm not concerned with the bourgeois ways of accumulating wealth. They almost talk like some Buddhist monk. But where's the gas in your car coming from? Where's the food coming from? Somebody has to make it. Somebody has to produce it. You have to sleep somewhere. You had to pay for the ticket to get into the concert. They have to pay for the substances they use and abuse. So where's that coming from? So it's like a culture of sabotage when you don't perform in school, you study the wrong things, you make the wrong decisions in life, even in your personal life, and then you're left hanging. You have nothing, and you're just. And you have this mentality of, okay, the only thing that's gonna fix everything or fix my life is some sort of a revolution. Like in the intelligence world, there's a term, I think it's called rolling somebody down the hill. I don't know exactly what service had invented this thing, but this is when a trained intelligence officer or a team, sometimes even a team of officers, they insert themselves into the life of the target person, and they will subtly get this person to sabotage his life, to get him to the point where he has nothing really more to lose. When and then groups started to do the same thing all over the place. This is like even extreme right-wing groups, they do the same thing. They kind of get you into their circles, And then they want you to do stupid things or say stupid things, and then you get into trouble, and then you get into more trouble and more trouble and more trouble until you've got nothing to lose. This is what happened to, this rolling down the hill phenomenon is what happened to the Oklahoma City bomber. Timothy McVeigh. He had this career, like a really good career ahead of him in the military, but then he got into these truther circles, these patriotic, rebellious truther circles, and that ruined his life. And we've seen that, in Germany, we've seen that over the years so much when people start ruining their lives. And when some people had something, they get into this truther thing, they lose what they have, lose their family, lose their job, lose whatever status they had. With the left, it's more like, we're going to prevent you from ever getting anything. So, women, I don't need a man. I don't need a family. I don't need, really these family bonds because that's old and that's crappy. But then they don't have anybody and they sabotage themselves when the clock is ticking. So then they have nothing but the cult. And, and when you follow some leftist, passion, then the clock starts running out. Now you're waiting tables. Now you work as a barista and you can't pay your rent. And then you want a revolution. You want some violent overthrow. Now, after World War II, the United States and Britain rebuilt Western Germany with a new legal security mechanism built into the legal system. So the ability to ban a political party or another organization, if it can be proven in the highest court based on evidence gathered through various means, including espionage, that it is aggressively pursuing the overthrow of the republic and the implementation of a dictatorship. Being a tool for a foreign power is also grounds for a ban. So that's why, and they don't use that much anymore, but they used to actually apply all these tools. The Communist Party of Germany, the KPD, was ruled to be illegal in 1956. It was irrelevant in the court's opinion whether such a party had no realistic prospects of implementing its plans in the medium or short term, or whether the intention was to wait until circumstances became more favorable. Okay, that's a very important thing. So you don't wait forever until this problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger. You tackle it now. You tackle the structures, you prove what's going on, and you make that illegal. And so the court's opinion, this was actually very well done at the time. It says, despite some internal resistance, the KPD was the first non-Russian party to join the Third Communist International, the Comintern, founded by Lenin in 1919. According to its statutes of August 7th, 1920, the Comintern was founded to organize joint actions of the proletarians of various countries who pursue the one goal: the overthrow of capitalism, the establishment of the dictatorship of the proletariat, and an international Soviet republic for the complete abolition of classes and the realization of socialism. Now, then, during the internal German unrest and conflicts of 1920 to 1923, the Comintern's optimistic expectations regarding the possibilities of a revolution in Germany led to a radicalization of the disputes. In the summer of 1923, the time seemed ripe for a decisive blow against the bourgeois state. Weakened by the Ruhr conflict and inflation, concrete plans for action were considered to be carried out with armed proletarian hundreds. They actually had weapons stored. They had everything was ready for 1923 to have a full-blown revolution here in Germany. It was already announced sort of by the Russians. Yeah, it's coming. We're doing it. It's going to happen. But then Moscow changed its mind for strategic reasons. And so this thing was called off for that time, but it almost happened. Then the opposition to the federal government intensified during the Cold War period from the summer of 1950 onward. as the KPD, the Communist Party of Germany, stood unconditionally on the side of the Soviet Union. The federal government declared in a resolution in 1950 that the membership of a civil servant, employee, or worker in the federal service in the Communist Party of Germany was incompatible with their duty of loyalty to the state, since the KPD was among the organizations that sought to undermine the free democratic order. So you could not work for the government and be a member of the KPD or be associated with the KPD.
So in 1950, the KPD, the German Communist Party, was legal
It was
in 1950?
well. This was the kind of the first step. This was a few years before the party was banned. So initially after the
Because
war,
the
it was
Nazi Party now, right after World War II, the Nazi Party was banned, and they had denazification in Germany, as
yeah,
we
but
know. Of course,
there was another Nazi party. They called it the SRP right after the war, the Socialist Reich Party. I think it was called the SRP. And they were gaining in popularity, and I think they were also banned in the 50s. But for a few years, they could operate. Just
now you had
as a-
Adenauer was your chancellor in the 50s, and could you comment on your thoughts on him and the way he governed?
well, there was a study, and I quoted it in one of my books. This was a study from the U.S. From the U.S. military about itself, or the one of the older military intelligence organizations was called the Counterintelligence Corps, the CIC. So this is what was used to rebuild Germany, because they already had a blacklist even before victory over the Nazis. They already had a blacklist of people, and they had a whitelist of people. And so they went with the whitelist and rebuilt the political system, and practically every significant politician, any new significant politician here was effectively working for the CIC, or they were handled by the Counterintelligence Corps, which is to be expected after when you lose a war and when there's an occupational government, and then there's a
Now,
transition.
Adenauer was anti-Nazi before, when Hitler was in power. Could you tell us a little bit about his background?
I went into this many years ago, so I'm trying to remember all the details, because there was an extensive whitelist and an extensive blacklist. And the whitelist is interesting because some of these names that were immediately available after the war, some of these names, there's some of them we know they spied against the Nazis during the war. Some of these people on the whitelist, there is a suspicion, at least from my side, a very strong suspicion that they spied on that they spied against the Nazis, and this is why they ended up on the whitelist. For example, Franz Josef Strauß, who went on to be the new democratic leader, a democratic leader of the state of Bavaria, where I am now. He was, later files from multiple agencies basically confirmed that, or strongly hinted that he worked, that Strauss worked for U.S. intelligence and even had collaborated with U.S. intelligence, during World War II, when he was like a young soldier and he had information that was relevant. So that went on. So that went on, and so after the war, so a few crazy parties tried their thing, and then they got spied on, and then they got banned, outright banned, with a ton of evidence. Okay, and there was no question anymore that yes, this was a fascist party or this was a communist party, and they had specific plans that this is not legal political action. This is just subversive criminal action. And the Article 21, Paragraph 2 of our fundamental law does not require documentation of the objectives of a crazy group. in the sense that all goals must be written down or otherwise fixed. Reaching an understanding within a party's leadership bodies is possible even without such a formal definition, and by its very nature is not uncommon. Therefore, secret objectives and subsequent changes to originally stated objectives are legally relevant, provided they can be proven. So this is when a party says, okay, our program, our official program is totally legal, and we're just pretend to be very, very legal, but then internally they say something completely different, and they don't write that down. But if you get this evidence, that of course makes it legal to ban an organization. Of particular importance is a statement that the KPD, the Communist Party of Germany, was guided in all its activities by the theory of Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Stalin. The KPD thus expresses that it views the writings and other testimonies of these thinkers and politicians as components of a unified, self-contained doctrine and makes them the basis of its political thought and action. In paragraph 48 of the resolution of the 1951 Party Congress, the KPD party affirmed Stalin's words that it was, quote, necessary for the party, especially its leading elements, to fully embrace the revolutionary theory of Marxism, which is inextricably linked with revolutionary practice. During the oral proceedings, the KPD stated that, as a Marxist-Leninist party, it pursues a policy based on the social scientific insights of Marxism-Leninism. A separation of theory and practice would therefore be absurd. As early as 1905, Lenin outlined in his work Two Tactics of Social Democracy in the Democratic Revolution, outlined alongside the direct path of socialist revolution, the indirect path of exploiting bourgeois freedom and bourgeois progress in the best possible way for the purposes of the proletariat's continued successful struggle for socialism. So yeah, it's like the best bridge to socialism. This is what you just talked about, more entitlement, more handouts, more debt, more everything, as a middle stage towards communism. All this talk, the struggle continues. According to Lenin, this period is inevitably a period of unprecedentedly bitter class struggle, sharp forms of the struggle, tenacious struggle, a bloody and bloodless, violent and peaceful military and economic, educational and administrative struggle against the powers and traditions of the old society. Okay, so that's kind of like this is how they used to do it after the war. They're not applying that so much anymore. Especially, when even though these tools are there. And you mentioned the AfD, the right-wing party. And it's like it was always easy in the past, decades and decades and decades, always very easy to infiltrate right-wing groups because you just mimic what they say, you mimic what they believe, you put money into this, and then you get trusted. And you just do the standard thing, you infiltrate, and that always worked. Now, when an older party was infiltrated, far right-wing party, the NPD, this is when things got a little bit sketchy, because the infiltration was so successful. When the attempt was made to ban the party, legal proceeding and then putting all the evidence or most of the evidence on the table, when that happened, the court said, well, there's a problem because there was too much infiltration. We got to that point where, as a court, we can't decide if this extremist line and these extreme plans, if that was the party or the infiltrating, officers or the infiltrators and the paid informants. So for that reason, the NPD was not banned. They tried again later, and then they said, well, the party is not relevant enough to be banned. We'll just let it exist, which is also weird. So it's this is kind of how how easy it was to infiltrate right wing parties, and now we have the much bigger AFD, and the AFD, they can't really decide if they're pro America or pro Russia. Like the supporters, the members, the voters, like half of them are pro America and half of them are pro Russia. So they're kind of split. And we have to assume that this party is extremely infiltrated by various intelligence services, domestic and foreign, from all different countries. You know, they all try to infiltrate. They all try to infiltrate the right wing. And so,
Of course, who's best at infiltrating? Who's the better infiltrator?
What do you mean?
What service is best at doing it? Infiltrating and taking over a party.
In this country,
Yeah.
well, it's like the domestic spy service is very small, and it's always been like that. It's comically small, and during the Cold War, it was even smaller. And so this means that the British didn't really trust us, and the Americans didn't really trust us that much. So there was always a very strong Anglo spy presence here. This was built into this country after the war. And so when the German service infiltrated a German party, this was always done with American help or British help. But when it comes to the court proceedings, they would be very, very quiet about American help or British help. Right? This is very hands off. This is not supposed to be that public. But eventually it came out that the actual founder of the NPD party, far right-wing party, the founder of the NPD, an aristocrat named Adolf von Tadden, he was a British spy. He worked for a British spy service, or the SIS or MI6, or one of the British services. So you can never be quite sure who's working for whom in this country. So this is why, and that's not the only case. I mean, we had the mainline left party, the Social Democrats, and they've been very pro-Soviet for a very long time, and they've had this whole basic outline. You know, that's different leftists talked about. Yeah, we'll just pretend to be democratic, but we want socialism. You know, this is just our way to get socialism. And they really try to infiltrate the culture, infiltrate the whole country, and change the country. So why was that? I mean, that was infiltrated as well, but why did nothing ever really come out of it? There must have been some kind of ploy, again, probably trying to create a controlled left sphere, which went out of control.
I think that there is a difference between revolutionary communism and social democrats. Although you could say a communist is a socialist in a hurry, is one of the things that people have said.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah, but social democracy, and Anatoly Golitsyn underscores this in his book. Social democracy, and to some extent the Labour Party in England and the Fabian Society, they want to do things peacefully. They want to use democratic methods. There's a difference between trying to take over a country, and this is what Lenin had all kinds of words to attack such people. He attacked the democratic socialists in Germany. He attacked. He was part of the Russian Social Democratic Party. Actually, the Bolsheviks were a wing of the Russian Social Democratic Party. People don't realize, but they believed in violent revolution. And he mocked and he excoriated all of the Democrats and the people who wanted to. He called them economists because they were going to get better conditions for the worker. But what we want the worker to feel his pain, so he'll revolt, right? So there's these differences between communists and democratic socialists that need to be marked. Democratic socialism, and you could say the American Democratic Party is a democratic socialist. This is what a number of these politicians in the United States, like the squad. What's her name? AOC.
Hmm.
She says that she's a democratic socialist. Um, and it is okay if we take it seriously. Are they or are they not? We have the Democratic Socialists of America, really much more, by the way, left wing, more like revolutionaries in disguise, because in this party, they had a scandal a couple years back where they were actually praising Stalin's assassination of Trotsky, and they
Hmm.
claimed to be democratic socialists, right? So that's just, you're not a democratic socialist if you're praising Stalin,
Yeah, and that's
right?
why we need. This
Um,
is this is why it was such a it was such a moment of clarity back then. Um, when the KPD was banned in this country, and there was evidence for it, and there was
yeah.
a legal framework for it.
And we didn't do that in America. We had briefly the Communist Party here in the U.S. was illegal at times, but for many decades now it's been legal. It's just so small. They've basically taken over, and this is something I heard in the 80s, taken over the Democratic Party. Well, what do you mean taken over?
Hmm.
They don't have absolute control over the Democratic Party, but I think they have a decisive influence within it. And people, I don't think most Democrats know this. I don't think Republicans realize it, but you can see it in certain the certain people that end up at the top of the party, like the Obamas, like the Clintons, like Biden, people who really had ties to the communist bloc when they were younger. The Institute for Policy Studies, for example, that was a KGB think tank via Cuba that basically supported the Clintons. Um, there's this integration. Now you would maybe say, okay, well, how much of this was a false opposition? How much did American intelligence get into
Yeah, that's
uh,
why we need clarity.
these
Hmm.
organizations? And I think it's very clear to me that they didn't, because the FBI was forbidden from infiltrating and actually having files on subversive groups within the United States. So our intelligence services here were blinded, and if anybody was doing that illegally, well, they took away, they prosecuted FBI officials in the late 70s. They brought this case before this, and believe it or not, these FBI officials were operating against the Weathermen,
Hmm.
the group
Yeah.
that Bernadine Dorn and
Bill Ayers.
Bill Ayers, who basically launched Obama's political career in their living room in Chicago.
Saul
Uh,
Alinsky,
this
wasn't he around?
Saul Alinsky, yes. Well, of course, he never, these are people that never officially identified themselves with the Communist Party USA. Obama, of course, was trained by Frank Marshall Davis, who was a member of the Communist Party and suspected as a KGB agent by the FBI. He was on an arrest list. If World War III ever broke out, he was to be arrested immediately. He had been caught taking photographs, pictures of Pearl Harbor,
Hmm.
which might have been militarily useful to the Russians, to the Soviets. So this infiltration of America, it's a very serious question, and of course, should this activity have been tracked? Yes, but it was basically made illegal in the United States to track subversive activity. We go from vilifying Joseph McCarthy in the
Hmm.
50s to actually making any kind of counterintelligence against domestic far right revolutionary groups illegal, effectively illegal. Now, in Germany, it was different. But yet, Germany seems quite infiltrated anyway.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, we Germany got infiltrated from all kinds of directions. I mean, this has always been a massive problem, and eventually this problem was too big to handle. I mean, even when the Nazis tried to create this monolithic, crazy version of a Roman Empire, and be just surveil everybody and control everybody. Even that didn't work anymore because there was so many embedded subversive people, or there were people that
Well, the Nazi Party
uh,
was full of communists.
Yeah,
And Hitler
yeah,
used to brag about that
yeah.
communists
And this
made the
is how,
best Nazi.
and then suddenly, a guy like Martin Bormann, eventually he gave all the secrets of the military to the Soviet Union,
Yeah, he was
and
a
they knew.
Soviet agent. Martin
Yeah.
Bormann and Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo, was a Soviet. But the other thing is, Joseph Goebbels was a red Nazi.
Hmm.
He had socialist proclivities. So the Nazi Party was a combination. It was National Socialism, so it was a combination of nationalist and socialist elements. So it wasn't just strictly a right wing party; it was a right and a
Yeah.
left wing
And
party,
it's like when
bringing both things together.
so in the US, obviously, because as you just described, the tools were taken away, the tools were off the table, so you can't really apply law, you can't really find people who actively want to destroy the United States. So first of all, then you get a rising potential terror threat. And then, of course, when the terror happens, then, of course, the FBI is allowed to do things and they can, start to investigate. But then how many terrorists are there? And sympathizers, people who give their addresses to a terrorist or loan their car or get a car for a terrorist or stash things for a terrorist because they have a clean address, right? Because terrorism needs an infrastructure, and that's one aspect of it. That's gonna be it's becoming a huge problem. And the other aspect is all these sleeper communists. They pretend to be moderate, democratic, blah blah blah, but they're radical and they infiltrate society. They go to the universities and they get study law, and then they get into politics, or they become judges and or fancy lawyers like. I mean, Hillary Clinton was a fancy lawyer once. I mean, she was a fancy lawyer once, and so
She
then,
worked for the Rose Law Firm, but she first, right out of law school, she worked for a law firm in California that
yeah,
represented the Black Panthers. So
great.
she was, yeah, no, she was a communist, And if Larry Nichols, if you ever talk to him, I talked to him years ago. He died of cancer, I think, since, but he was really close to the Clintons when they were governing Arkansas. And he, when he first met Hillary Clinton, he said she was wearing a button. She stank like a bad hippie, like she hadn't
Mm,
bathed in 6 weeks, and she had this button that said "Proud member of the Communist Party" on her. Um, so these people were subversives, and how she changed her image, where people say, "Oh, Hillary Clinton, she's a moderate or she's even conservative," they would describe her that. It's ludicrous.
mm.
They don't understand the history of this
Or
woman
the
and the
the former
deceptive self portrayal.
the
Yeah.
previous guy, that Norwegian guy, was it Jens Stoltenberg, who was Secretary General of NATO? He had like a
Yes. Now that's
communist past.
interesting. Yeah.
He had a
Right.
communist past, and he wasn't the only Secretary General of NATO who had
But
like a
but did
communist.
he really change, or did he merely cosmetically change? See, there's the
No, and
question.
it's
How do
just
you
like this is the
know?
thing, and this is the thing. When you're young, and you get in with the communists, right? Um, and you get in with the communists, and so then you're on a government watch list or something, or you get caught with something, or you get arrested at an illegal demonstration or something, right? Um, this is when if you've already been recruited by Soviet intelligence, they have different options how to use you, how to play with you, how to play you, right? So something that they've done in Germany for quite a while, especially after the war, um, what the Soviets would do is they would recruit somebody and then try to get him to join an intelligence service, a spy service, and this person was then supposed to spy against communists, right? So, person gets recruited by communists, pretends to be conservative, joins a German spy agency, and this guy says, "Hey, I can, I still know some people that are communists, so I could spy against them." Okay, fine, you do that. And so then the Soviet service, they can make successes happen for that guy, that is
Yeah,
controlled by
because
Moscow.
the guy now is supposedly working for his own side's intelligence services when he's really got Soviet sympathies.
Yeah. And
So
so
he can cover for other people.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got Sir Roger Hollis's case in World War II. Sir Roger Hollis was in charge of tracking the activities of communists during the period of the Hitler-Stalin Pact in Great Britain. And turns out he was a communist. He had probably been recruited when he was in China. And I think it was William West wrote the book on this on the background of Sir Roger Hollis, ended up becoming head of MI5, by the way. That is the equivalent of the British counterintelligence service or the FBI in America. He was he was even accused by his deputy of being a Soviet agent in the Spycatcher book. So it's a quite a mess. And of
Mm.
course, because of our legal system and because people have rights, you can't even fire people for suspicion. You have to prove things. And although in the older days they did, for when Kim Philby fell under suspicion, they didn't go ahead and make him head of MI6. They basically kicked him out of the service effectively. He did some minor role in the Middle East. He was a journalist in the Middle East until he fled ultimately to the Soviet Union and proved that he had been. He wrote a book about it, My Silent War, in which he described how he'd betrayed Britain and he was a communist all along, very proud of it. But these people, we both on the one side, we underestimate the number of these people and their effect. And on the other side, we often can fall into suspecting or accusing people wrongly. That can happen too. So it's a terrible mess to sort it all out. It
Yeah.
takes an incredible judgment and prudence to even
I mean,
confront this issue.
yeah. Oh, and then we had this scandal with the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which started out as
Oh, the stuff coming out on
yeah,
that now
which
is
started out
quite
as
sensational.
an organization, very left wing from the start, of course, and they said we're gonna cover the legal. The legal representation for people that can't afford representation and that sort of thing, and eventually it morphed into a watch group. Okay, so they would claim to be the expert on the map of extremism out there. The KKK groups, American National Socialists, truthers, influencers, you name it. And so then the SPLC tried to become an institution, so they could be relied on when the government, some government agency or some private corporation, especially social media or other media, when they don't have experts on extremism, they would go to the SPLC and ask them, okay, what's legit, what's not legit, what's a hate group, what's not a hate group. Becoming an institution, and now there are indictments against the SPLC because in the past they used to spend millions of dollars on informants in the far right sphere, and so the charges are, I think it was money laundering and bank fraud because they used various means to conceal the payments to their sources. And then we heard that these were not just any sources, these were very influential people in the right wing, very decisive people in the right wing, and they were paid really well. When I looked at this, and of course this is an ongoing investigation, and we'll get more info. We got more info in the coming months when this all plays out. But the first reaction of some people was, wait, they get donations, they get money for combating hate while they were paying people that spew hatred. So there's like this conflict of interest that people noted. Obviously, the SPLC says, and their supporters say, this was very legit. The government knew about it. We pay informants for information, and this is how we can track right-wing activities. But when you look at those sums and you look at those numbers, paying hundreds of thousands here and hundreds of thousands there, this kind of reminds me of what happened in Germany with the NPD party and some other far right-wing groups. There was all the time some operation got leaked or exposed, government operation. And we found out that this famous Nazi worked for the government, secretly worked as an informant for the government. And then this next guy, him too. He also was an informant for the government. Oh, that guy as well was an informant. And when you looked at these people, they were the ones that showed the initiative. They somehow, we know where they got the money, but they at the time said to their comrades, "We found money. We're going to create something. We're going to create the structures." And observers noted that without these people and their money and their initiative, there wouldn't have been significant structures in the extreme right wing. Because a lot of these far right-wing people in Germany, they're very dysfunctional, not good at organizing, not good at keeping secrets, and they have to make money somehow. They have to have day jobs, and they get tired of having legal issues, with the government. And so it was questionable how much of the right wing would have existed without these informants that got paid so well. And even internally, sometimes these comrades...
You're saying the German right.
the German right, yeah. So sometimes, even internally...
Do you think Konrad Adenauer was a British agent?
Who?
Konrad Adenauer, your chancellor who formed the CDU, the Christian Democratic, that basically formed the political right in your country.
Well,
conservative.
I'm talking about...
He cooperated with the British after World War I. He was the mayor of Cologne. It's just an interesting aside. I just wondered if you thought that of him.
Well, the British and the Americans were supposed to divide up the tasks, but there was overlap for sure. I mean, when somebody would be associated with more than one allied intelligence service or spy service, there was an additional layer to it, because the British, what was this guy's name? The British, they sent their people over here to create the German spy service, right? And these British people that came over here, these Brits, they had an aristocratic background, very strong aristocratic background, and this aristocratic background ties back to Germany in the very distant past. So there was that layer as well. But it was after the war, it was all very controlled by Allied spy services. But then it kind of went into different directions, and of course the Soviets were everywhere as well.
Well, you had Reinhard Gehlen. The Gehlen organization was basically like a private. It was created by the Americans, and they had brought Gehlen and some of his lieutenants to Washington. They created this thing, and it was not actually a government service at first. It took time for it to become a government service.
Yeah, and this is like there was so many disasters in post-war intelligence. When the head of counterintelligence was
Gehlen got penetrated by a Soviet agent very famously.
Yeah,
yes.
and also these other people. Some people, they just defected and they fled to East Germany, and 10 years of operations were blown, and the fallout was crazy. And I mean, it was so much chaos, and that chaos could be exploited by communists who were paying. I mean, there was this one guy, we talked about him on the show before. He was doing it for the money, because he wanted to get into the intelligence world, because he was trained during the Nazi era, had this career in front of him, and the war was lost, and he had nothing. And he tried to get into the new domestic spy service. They didn't really want him, but only, and then he didn't want to take on a real job, and then the Soviets recruited him, and the Soviets said, "We're paying you, and we can make it happen for you to get into the German spy service." So sometimes it was just exploiting the chaos in Germany, and just exploiting people's vanity because they wanted the money and they wanted the status more than anything. And so when I read this coverage of this Southern Poverty Law Center scandal, I mean, the most important, I think the key aspect is not even that the SPLC and, the SPLC was paying people that were significant. They were paying people, and then they made money off of fighting all the hate. What I was looking into is how easy it was for the SPLC. I mean, they have a lot of money, though. This is not some dinky little organization. They have this huge endowment. So, but still, it was easy for them to infiltrate all kinds of right-wing groups. It was that easy. They talk about these informants that they recruited, and they give them numbers. They call them like F-37. This is one of them. It says F-37 was a member of the online leadership chat group that planned the 2017 Unite the Right event and attended the event at the direction of the SPLC. F-37 made racist postings under the supervision of the SPLC, helped coordinate transportation to the event for several attendees. Between 2015 and 2023, the SPLC secretly paid F-37 more than $270,000. And so this goes on like this. F9 got a cool $1 million over a decade for activities that included stealing documents from the neo-Nazi National Alliance. Then there was someone... several of the field sources were allegedly leaders of the organizations on which they were informing, including F. Unknown, the Imperial Wizard of the United Clans of America, F-30, who led the National Socialist Party of America, and another F. Unknown, a Ku Klux Klansman of unspecified sex who was married to an exalted Cyclops. F9, the $1 million document thief.
Married to an exalted Cyclops?
Yeah, exalted Cyclops. Yeah, the names of the KKK for these ranks are more crazy than in Masonry. F9, the $1 million document thief, was a fundraiser for the National Alliance. So that's how easy it is to infiltrate the right wing, right? I mean, this is something that conservatives, right-wingers, they have to be aware of that fact, because it has so many implications. Because it's not just these KKK guys and Nazi Party guys. It could be your favorite truther influencer. It could be your favorite guy who just talks all day into his microphone. And of course, when the DOJ announced this, that they were going after the SPLC, Twitter exploded with accusations. This guy must have been working for the SPLC. That guy must have been working for the SPLC. And that guy and that guy and that guy. Of course, we don't know any of that yet. But there's a high level of suspicion because of the clownish nature of some of these influencers and how they were almost outright sabotaging the Republicans, saying that maybe people should vote Democrat now and should wait for a true America First candidate from the Republicans in some distant future. And it's become so clownish and so crazy. And even though we can't tell at this point, we can't tell if this guy was bought and paid for, or that guy was bought and paid for, or that guy was bought and paid for. But we don't even need that confirmation. I mean, it should be enough to say that an influencer is not professional, is not giving us anything substantial, not giving us anything new, doesn't seem like a trustworthy person, and there's no transparency. I mean, some of these people, they want maximum publicity, they want their face and their name everywhere, but at the same time, they want maximum privacy. Nobody's supposed to know where they live. Nobody's supposed to know about their finances. Nobody's supposed to know about their private life. Everything is supposed to be like super secret, as if they're like this, super secret agent. So they want the cake and they want to eat it too. Maximum publicity, maximum privacy. But now you see so many people, they got so much media power, and we don't know who they are. We don't know who they are, and we don't know how they got to be famous in the first place. And this is something that anybody who knows anything about the spy world, or anybody anybody who knows about this stuff would immediately realize, okay, there's an influencer, he wants my attention, he wants my money, but there's no transparency, there's no clear history of that guy, or there's a shady history, and this doesn't seem right. This just doesn't jive, right? And here's the next thing. Here's the next thing. This is Jeffrey Epstein's and Peter Thiel's fingerprints on the alt-right and extreme conspiracy movements. This was an interesting story from, what was it called? I don't even know. I've heard about this before, the Byline Times. I don't know exactly what their general line is, but they did some interesting digging, right? So, and there seems to be no escaping the matrix on the internet. So young and not so young, frustrated men mostly would browse the web, searching for rebellion, like in the Hollywood movie The Matrix. The feeling of waking up to the reality that most of everything is fake, part of the system. Well, it turns out that all over the alt-right movement, 4chan, the Q cult, Steve Bannon's spiderweb, and even extreme right-wing sites were the fingerprints of Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, and some people tied to the government. So this whole digital ecosystem was used as an experimental sandbox to learn how online crowds functioned, copy the mechanisms, and turn them into an elegant weapon. So Jeffrey Epstein was associated with Peter Thiel, who was widely known for the smart surveillance product Palantir, which sounds like an evolution of the old programs like Camelot and earlier work from the Simulmatics Corporation or Project Troy. Key is measuring people's personality and understanding how they make decisions or judgments and how they interact with each other. And so Thiel was connected to a man called Jeff Gizia, an investor and political operative who was associated with Charles C. Johnson. Speculated to be part of this somehow was Andrew Auernheimer, a hacker and neo-Nazi provocateur known online as Weave. And so this is connected to the Daily Stormer. This used to be, I think, years ago, this used to be more popular. So Daily Stormer is allegedly
that's a neo-Nazi
yeah.
publication.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's all the Jews and blah blah blah. So Daily Stormer, according to, Daily Stormer allegedly has a connection to this Gizia guy, and connecting those platforms to Thiel's wider network was a single figure, Andrew Auernheimer. His ties to Thiel had been rumored in leaked Epstein correspondence, had never previously been corroborated. Now they found Auernheimer's own private statements and documented network activity. So, in 2011, Jeffrey Epstein met with the creator of the anonymous message board 4chan. And out of 4chan came like this Q cult and all sorts of political craziness. And so there's a connection between all these guys. Epstein was expressing a clear interest in social media giants and data analytics. The files show he requested investor Ian Osborne to set up meetings with Mark Zuckerberg, Meta Facebook, Tim Cook from Apple, and Peter Thiel in 2012. And 4chan caught the attention of Breitbart executive and future Trump strategist Steve Bannon. And Bannon, as we now know, Steve Bannon had a lot of communication with Jeffrey Epstein. And Bannon has always been so full of himself. Like, we have these digital armies, and we are the new right wing, and he's an esoteric. He's like into this. I think he's this Julius Evola stuff, and they kind of this right wing chaos magic. And so So the DOJ files show that by 2018, Epstein was repeatedly seeking out a meeting with Charles Murray, the author of the influential and widely debunked race science book, The Bell Curve. An email exchange from 2019 revealed in the DOJ documents indicates that an FBI analyst believed a meeting may have taken place between Epstein and two agent provocateurs. The author of the email states that the two known right-wing influencers were believed to have been involved in the promotion of the Pizzagate narrative. Bannon, an associate of Epstein's, who likely knew about his activities, periodically used his War Room podcast to widen QAnon's reach in 2019 and 2020. And then Michael Flynn, a retired lieutenant general, Trump ally, and leading public supporter of the QAnon movement, was ostensibly caught privately deeming it total nonsense. So this is when, this is kind of like, these weird people, and we know how much Russia is featuring in the Epstein files. You know how often Russia is mentioned, how Epstein was mentioned, how Epstein was talking to and relating information from Russian intelligence guys. And he told, and at some point,
moving
Epstein,
money through Russian banks in the
and telling the Russians to back off.
Redacted part of it, yes.
Yeah, and at one time he was even asking the Russians to back off of some guy that Epstein wanted to be involved in.
There's the problem. You don't want to say Epstein is a counterintelligence double agent working for the Americans, because what he did was so horrific. If the Americans are doing that, then they've already been corrupted and penetrated just by the fact of the extensive corruption that entails, right? I mean, that's the kind of thing that you don't do. So that's kind of proof that he's not working for our side. He's corrupting our side.
When you have Epstein and Zuckerberg, you know, and then the Facebook, some of this Facebook data
and
was
that goes and you mentioned Bannon. I mean, it goes for all of these names that are associated with Epstein. I mean, they all have this problem.
Yeah, and when you have this crowd of actors, this crowd of operatives in play, and they're scraping. And they talked about basically scraping data from these forums and other platforms, figuring out who was susceptible to what, how they think, how they can be manipulated, and then you have some digital magic, and then you can turn this into a weapon, and then you can start using this thing, it seems like with this Pizzagate thing, this was at a time when the Russians really wanted Trump to be president, because they had more expectations, they had bigger expectations in Trump. Now they're apparently disappointed. And now,
why would they be disappointed? No, he's done everything that's helped them out now.
Well, they're trashing him. I mean,
they much in his first term.
Alexander Dugin, Alexander Dugin gave the order digitally and said, "Okay, now we're against Trump. Now we hate Trump."
Yeah,
and then
then he switched back and forth a number of times. It's almost like they're just trying to guide Trump.
But these influencers, they followed what Dugin was saying. Really popular influencers turned on Trump.
Even though Dugin hates Americans and wants to destroy America, these dumb Americans will follow that.
Yeah, it's
somehow
like they
caught
can,
up in the esotericism he pronounces on.
Yeah, and they can play with the minds of the people. They scraped all the data, they analyzed all the data, they know who the target audience is, and then they can turn this into a weapon. And as you said, you know, if if the Russians if the Russians are not sure about Trump or whatever, they can go back and forth, and then they can change the narrative again and send out the orders, and the influencers will follow along, and they can try to steer the audience again. They steered them in this direction, but then now they have to steer them back to where they were, and now it seems like, judging from the statements of some of these influencers, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and blah 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 blah. Apparently, and even General Flynn, they are planning, it seems, to have new candidates for the Republican Party. They want to prepare the next.
They want MAGA
campaigns.
Without Trump. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
Marjorie
exactly.
Taylor Greene is
They want
Marjorie
Taylor Greene, or they want somebody else. And Tucker Carlson has been talking about a third party, and that's also something that they seem to be interested in. So they have the digital armies. They have they have some of these influencers in play. And they know what works with the audience. Like these talking points.
Nick Fuentes is telling people to vote Democrat or not vote at all.
Yeah, and he says that he would only support, and people should only support, a true America First candidate, which is defined by no foreign interventions, letting everybody else do their thing, not stopping the Russians, not stopping the Russian proxies, and call that America First, but also a bunch of other points that they want implemented, realistic or not.
America First now is to allow America to no longer be a great power, and to not understand that America's success is intimately tied to what they attack as globalism. That is the global post-World War II order that America economically dominated was beneficial to American citizens and our way of life. And them saying that it's not, they don't understand what they're talking about. And they're basically ruining America's position. And of course, all they're doing is splitting the right so that the left can dominate in American politics, which is really dangerous.
Yeah, it's like this chaos among the influencers. I mean, there's this influencer war that's been going on. So one group says it's all the Jews, and if you don't agree with that, then you're the enemy. So there's this infighting. Then there's these alliances that have formed. So Alex Jones was not getting along with Candace Owens, but now they think, oh, okay, Trump hates us now, and diehard Trump supporters don't like us now. So now we have to create this unified front, and Alex Jones is almost glorifying Nick Fuentes for some strange reason. Even though years ago Jones would have laughed about a guy like Fuentes, and he probably still is laughing about Fuentes, but not in public. In public, he's like, let's build our MAGA movement without Trump. And General Flynn, Alex Jones is apparently really tight with General Flynn, and they all love Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she loves them, and they love Tucker Carlson, or they pretend to love Tucker Carlson, even though they probably don't, and Carlson pretends to like them, even though he probably doesn't. So this is a situation where we're now, Alex Jones just lost InfoWars, his long-standing platform. So he had to.
He lost InfoWars? Tell us about that.
They had to vacate the building because the money that's coming in, all these business entities associated with Alex Jones's InfoWars. There's like this government appointed person that's sitting on top of it, and this person can control what happens with the money because of the Sandy Hook lawsuits. So there was these different court cases deciding on how do the Sandy Hook parents, how do the parents get money from Jones, right? You close it all down and sell everything and hand them the money, or you let InfoWars continue and InfoWars pays them every year or every month. There were different ideas, but now the order came down. There was no more rent being paid for the building, so they had to vacate the building. These high level internet connections that cost a lot of money, that will not be renewed. The satellite uplinks to get the show to all these affiliate radio stations, no longer getting paid. All this different stuff. So now they had to leave the building, go to another place, and improvise a new show. And they have a different website now. And they lost, if I remember correctly, they lost the websites. So I think Infowars.com will not get you to Alex Jones's will not get you an Alex Jones website. So he kind of lost the structure that he built. Candace Owens has been sued again by someone from, I think, Turning Point USA, because Candace, this was like the big topic of Candace Owens' show. She would make these accusations or veiled accusations against Erica Kirk and some of the other staffers at TPUSA. And I think the security chief, the former head of security for Charlie Kirk, that guy is now suing Candace Owens for defamation. And the McCall case, the president of France and his wife, the president of France and his wife are suing Candace Owens, and that's now really started. And Candace is really, really nervous. And it's just, there's this weirdness about these people. I mean, let's forget about the fact that Jones lost InfoWars because he was making these accusations against Sandy Hook parents. This was not like Jones was getting into it with Hillary Clinton or something, right? And getting sued by Hillary Clinton or getting sued by Joe Biden or something. No, Jones went after the parents of dead children and got sued. Candace Owens may be brought down. Candace Owens may be brought down. Because she accused the wife of the French president to be a man. Like, what is that? Like, why would you risk everything and all your money and your whole thing you've built for some stupid allegations against Sandy Hook parents and Brigitte Macron? It just makes no sense whatsoever. Jones is a weird character. Always been a weird character. Weird stuff going on. His connections, his private life, the 2 divorces, and blah, 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 blah. Just strangest character. Now, Candace Owens is in a Twitter fight with Laura Loomer. Now, Laura Loomer is very pro-Trump, very pro-Israel, and so they got into this argument, and now they're starting to leak stuff about each other or trade accusations against each other, and this is concerning Candace Owens' British husband, the son of Lord Farmer, right? And it's just the weirdness never stops. The weirdness never stops with these people. And it's that kind of a chaos that may or may not be exploited, with all these different influencers out there. And there's many of them. This chaos may be exploited by the SPLC, the Russians, somebody else, right? Because it's these weirdos out there, and they love money, and they love the status, and they don't want a normal job. They want to sit in front of a camera and just scrape content off of the internet This is what Alex Jones's business model was. And I think even the business model of Candace Owens, they look around on the web, what's interesting to the audience, what accusations are floating around, and then they take those ideas, and then they sell those ideas back to the audience. And they just recycle that stuff. And you can take these ideas for free. I mean, all that Sandy Hook stuff, when the depositions happened against Alex Jones in the Sandy Hook case, we basically learned that Alex Jones's InfoWars, they weren't really looking at Sandy Hook. They didn't have time for it, or they didn't want to spend the money on a real investigation. They just looked around on the web, had some weird guests on, and then regretted those guests, and got this content basically for free, quoted that, commented on it, and that was what the audience was getting. The audience of InfoWars. So you get the stuff you can find on the web everywhere. You get that same stuff mentioned, commented on by Alex Jones. That was the business model. And they were getting things so wrong, so fundamentally wrong. And these are just influencers, mind you. Here's a guy who was a lot more than an influencer. This is Peter Mandelson. Now, in December of 2024, Mandelson was appointed British ambassador to the United States by Keir Starmer. Now, Starmer, he's had this communist past. And Starmer, I think, was it Starmer who went to the Soviet Union once to restore some monument? I think it was him. We talked about this before. So Starmer is a very suspicious guy. And of course, he makes Mandelson the ambassador. Mandelson, the ambassador to the United States. Yeah, this is from my website, candorintel.com. Files from Soviet Czech service. Keir Starmer was in a work camp at the height of the Cold War. The Daily Mail has revealed that Keir Starmer was listed in communist spy files after joining a Czechoslovak project camp at the height of the Cold War. The then 23-year-old was selected alongside 16 other people from around the world, most of them students, to restore a memorial to the victims of a Nazi reprisal behind the Iron Curtain in 1986. The operation was, of course, supervised by the Czech Secret Service, STB, and was intended to get to know the guests, create files, make recommendations as to who should be recruited by a communist secret service in the future. The Daily Mail found the dossier, his visa application, including a passport, photograph, handwritten personal details, kept in the archives, as well as the current labor leader. Other young people from the US, West Germany, Denmark, Spain, Finland, the Netherlands, and France joined the Czech project. Among them was one who went on to work in a senior role at the European Commission, and another who became a partner in a law firm in the city of London. Keir Starmer had just graduated from Oxford University with a law degree. So then, Starmer, he makes Peter Mandelson ambassador to the United States. Now, Mandelson did not come from a poor background. His father, George, was advertising manager of the Jewish Chronicle and an officer in the Royal Dragoons during the Second World War. His mother was the daughter of Herbert Morrison and his first wife, Margaret Kent. Morrison was a London County Council leader and a cabinet minister in the Attlee government, Clement Attlee. Of Polish Jewish ancestry, his grandfather, Norman Mandelson, founded the Harrow United Synagogue. So, raised in the suburb, Mandelson attended the Garden Suburb School and grammar school. During his teenage years, he joined the Young Communist League. The Young Communist League due to the UK support of the United States' role in the Vietnam War. And then he read philosophy, politics, and economics at the University of Oxford. Chairman of the British Youth Council. In 1978, he was delegated to attend the Soviet-organized World Festival of Youth and Students at Havana, Cuba. And then in September 2025, revelations about the extent of Mandelson's long-standing association with the American financier and sex offender Jeffrey Epstein ultimately resulted in Mandelson's dismissal as the British ambassador to the United States. The friendship, which had been publicly known about to some extent for some years, spanned at least from 2002 to 2011 and continued after Epstein's first conviction in 2008. Among the most damaging disclosures were a 2003 entry in Epstein's birthday book in which Mandelson described him as his best pal, and emails from 2008 in which Mandelson wrote that he thought the world of him and encouraged him to fight for early release from his 18-month sentence. Also emerged that Epstein had paid for Mandelson's travel in 2003 and that Mandelson had reportedly sought Epstein's assistance with a banking deal while serving as a UK cabinet minister. So this is the nightmare. This is the nightmare that we live in right now. A guy who was in a communist work camp behind the Iron Curtain makes that guy ambassador to the United States, and then recently we had the king visiting the U.S. King Charles was hanging out with Donald Trump, and they were making a really big deal out of it. And some people noticed that. It was nice to see that Anglo, celebrating the Anglo relationship and all that, and King Charles talked about NATO and the commitments and loyalty and blah blah blah. Sounded very nice, but a lot of commentators said that what has become of Britain? What has become of England? All the migrants, you can't say anything anymore against the craziness, or you get arrested. And the industry is mostly gone. He's a very green person, King Charles. He's a very green person, and his family was obsessed with population reduction. Especially this was Prince Philip, especially, who died a few years ago. It was about roughly the same age when he died as the Queen was when she died. And Prince Philip was really into this idea of reducing population sizes, and these aristocrats they created the World Wildlife Fund, or the Worldwide Fund for Nature. And they've had their fingers in the green movement. And let's not forget that most of the substance of these climate reports, these IPCC reports, the substance of it is the results of the computer simulations. This is when the computer program says, if we emit CO2 in 50 years, 100 years, the global temperature on average will rise by...
It's rubbish, because with computers, It's garbage in, garbage out. It's just garbage.
Yeah, but the main program is a British one. This is the Hadley Center in the UK Met Office. The British, along with the Americans, they created climate science, basically for military purposes, but then came the political stuff on top of it and the simulation. We all just fed everything into the simulation, and it says we're heating up the planet. And you have to trust us because we bought an American supercomputer, a Cray. We bought a Cray, and we ran this program that we came up with ourselves. Hadley Center, UK Met Office, which was military basically. And that's it then. So this is the oracle. This is what's the truth now, and the world has to follow along those lines. So yeah, it's a crazy world that we live in. We're moving towards World War III. Um, and people always thought that World War III would be either all out nuclear, or it would be kind of like the previous world wars. You had these different blocks that are fighting, and then there's a result. But it may be the case that the next world war will seem much more chaotic because of this division in the West, because of all this infiltration, and all this craziness and all the secret deal making and all the compromat, because of the British. They've had some of their most precious secrets stolen. I think it was by Anthony Blunt. When when Louis Mountbatten was supposed to get all these documents from Germany, but then he sent Blunt, and he was a Soviet spy, and he gave everything to the Soviets. So there's like these weirdo secret dealings, and people are compromised, and that's the NATO we have to deal with, and that's the governments that we have to deal with. A communist making a communist ambassador to the U.S., and then they remove him from the post because he's a longtime pal of Jeffrey Epstein, and then the Epstein files get released. I mean, tell me I'm dreaming, Jeff. This is how we are supposed to face the Eastern Bloc.
Well, we don't. We don't face them. We're gonna, like, China's gonna be our big trading partner still, right? I mean, Trump can't make up his mind. He's gonna put tariffs on China. No, China's gonna be our new partner. No, Xi is his friend. No, Xi is leading a threatening country. So I don't think Trump is consistent. And of course, we've seen in recent times. Now, that Trump has written a note to Congress saying that the war in Iran is over. Did you know that? Of course, he's afraid of the War Powers Act, which is probably not constitutional anyway. That limits his power, 60 days. He can't make war for 60 days. And of course, since there's a ceasefire, he says he's not he's not continuing the war, but he's continuing a blockade against Iran, which is an active war. So there's a contradiction there. Can the president blockade a country for more than 60 days under the War Powers Act? Boy, it's going to be interesting to see how it gets tested. But yeah, you have quite a tangle with the constitutional government and these people, the way they behave now. I think it's I'm fairly pessimistic about where things are headed, because we've seen that Trump and his populism doesn't work out. It has not worked out. He is an irresponsible leader. And of course, his followers now have turned against him because he's actually fighting one of America's enemies, which they don't like. So he's not consistent. The problem with saying that Trump is an agent of Russia is that he's too wild to be controlled by anybody. He's controlled by his own impulses, which are not really. He doesn't have any self-discipline. His mouth goes wherever his brain unthinkingly leads it, and then he follows. That's the kind of thing.
Yeah, and any
and of course his
video the
yeah,
Russians may put out, you can always say it's AI. It's in these day and age. In this day and age, you could always say that's not real.
yeah. I mean, in the essay that I'm working on now, it's sort of the conclusion of my 5-part series, is that all three of the major leaders of the three major powers, China, Russia, and the United States, are bad men. But more than that, their intellectual stature is not what the people before them were. I mean, Mao Zedong was very brainy, extremely intellectual, very smart. Xi Jinping is not this. Putin, who would admire and maybe even sometimes mimic Stalin, is no Stalin. He's too many hat sizes smaller than Stalin. And of course, the shoes of George Washington don't fit Donald Trump. There's something wrong with Donald Trump. And I think people are more increasingly able to see it. And I think it's a general phenomenon in the world that we have a general degeneration of leadership, of the concept of leadership, of what leaders ought to be, coming out of Bolshevism, which is a severe degeneration, a severe psychopathy in Russia, supposedly turned out of doors in 1991, but really continuing through the KGB officer, the former KGB Lieutenant Colonel Putin, and then Trump, the billionaire. Look, I will cite Aristotle, Aristotle's Politics, where he talks about the Carthaginian constitution and what was wrong with it. I think Aristotle was dead on here. He said the problem with he said there were 2 or 3 problems with the Carthaginian constitution, but the main problem, he said, was that offices were for sale. In other words, whoever spent the most to get elected to office would be in control of that office in Carthage. And he said that did a number of things. It meant money was qualifying people rather than virtue. And that gave a signal to the rest of society that the important thing was not to be virtuous, not to possess virtue of mind and the 4 cardinal virtues, but rather to have a lot of money. And this is really sort of similarly contaminated American politics when we have a billionaire president. And of course, money is really worshipped in the United States and by the West in a way that's not healthy. We have a very materialistic culture, and it goes again to Christopher Lasch. I mean, we got 2 sides of this. We've got the, government will level the playing field, and that we have to have socialism and we have to have high taxes and so on. That destroys wealth, and it destroys wealth for the lower middle class, for the working people, more than anyone else. And then on the other hand, you have Trump, the ruthless billionaire, who now, is destroying the economy through tariffs and through irresponsible economic policies. So, I mean, you could pick your poison, Democrat or Republican, which is worse. But I always figured the Republicans and Trump, at least the Republicans, would maybe keep him in line. But he created a cabinet that absolutely does not possess any of the party wisdom, the collective political wisdom of the conservative side in American politics. Instead, he's picked these Fox News faces and others that were basically just lackeys of his own, that they only sing his praises. This is toxic. And his narcissism has proved to be quite toxic in the governing of the country. I think Biden and the Democrats, I think it was Sam Vaknin who said that Obama was clearly a narcissist. I think we've got that enough from the left, but now we're getting it from the right. It's a bad situation. And so we're far beyond this idea of whether we can rein in subversion. I mean, when people call themselves conservatives or Christians, and they're just as subversive as the communists in terms of what they're effectively doing and the damage they're doing to the republic and to our position as a great power and as to our economic future. I mean, I'm definitely against the communists, but these people aren't going to save us. They're going to just cause us to fall into ruin faster. We don't have intelligent discussion. And as Christopher Lasch would say, the collapse of morality, the collapse of religious belief and discipline and self-discipline, and George F. Well, economic discipline, spending more than we've got, is going to lead us to civil war here in the United States. I think it may be that we'll be attacked by China and Russia before that, but maybe they're waiting for that signal. Right now, China and Russia, of course, it's the race to the bottom. They're destroying their own economies, getting ready for World War III. You see what's happening in Russia and Ukraine, having turned the tables on Russia. Russia's struggling to mobilize and to counteract Ukraine in ways that are unexpected, but they're not giving up. And you see what's happened in Iran. That's the best chance they have yet. Close the Strait of Hormuz, cause the West to collapse financially. This could really happen.
So we need clarity. So that means we can have this constant situation where people are presented to us. They come from seemingly from nowhere. Nobody knows them, and suddenly they are JD Vance, or they are
Or Nick
Pete
Fuentes,
Nick Fuentes, Pete Hegseth. Who knew
future
about?
president of the United States, right? Some people are saying.
Yeah, or Donald Trump. Donald Trump. People knew him from WWE wrestling when he made some appearances with his buddy Vince McMahon, and the beauty contests and this reality show. You're fired and blah blah blah. And then it's like, so most people didn't. Many people didn't even pay attention. They wouldn't even they've seen him, heard about him once or twice, or saw his cameo in the second Home Alone movie. But then it's like, oh, he's President Trump. He's MAGA. Like who is this guy? Who are these people? And it's like when it's just, to me, going back to the beginning of this episode here, it's always interesting when you finally get some clarity. When you have evidence, clear evidence, put in front of an actual court. You have transparency. A communist party is banned. Or we figure out that beyond any reasonable doubt that somebody has been working for a foreign intelligence service, or a communist country falls apart, and we get the files. We get the intelligence files, and we can go through them, and we figure out what they've been up to, whom they've been paying. I mean, we saw this with Orban, the Orban government, failing in Hungary. And they got this new guy now in there, who seems to be more pro-West and not pro-Russia. And so it seems like these Orban people, they've scattered and took money with them, and now the European right wing, or the European far right, is afraid of what might be in those files. Who took money from Orban on behest of the Russians, right? So this is why I've always been interested in these topics to begin with. Even as a child, I always wanted clarity. I always wanted to have something similar to all the science that we were surrounded with. You see, even as a child, you understand that there's all this technology around us that just works. The cars work, and the satellites, and then the early internet and airplanes, that all works. These complex things, and sending people to the moon and everything. But then when it comes to people and how they interact, it seems so chaotic, it seems so weird, and everybody's hiding things. Everybody is hiding a ton of things. And I always wanted it.
What do you mean they're hiding? What are they hiding?
Well, they're hiding crazy personal secrets, or they're hiding political secrets. That they're about to shoot the president, or they're secretly working with a Nazi group that's been funded by Russia, or there's something of that nature, or they have strange contacts and they've worked with illegal groups, that sort of thing. All these weirdo secrets, and we need clarity. And we need clarity about so many things. Especially when it's become such a big thing to basically adopt Nazi ideology in America and say it's all the Jews, and we need fascism to fix it.
This is the most shocking turn of all, that this would go to this extreme here. I saw the left winning, but I didn't see the right disintegrating into this as it has, and it really is moving in this pattern. But I suppose you could say that this has always been in the cards, that this lack of clarity, because they've corrupted language, and they've accepted lies, they've accepted the disinformation of their enemy to flatter themselves, and their hearts are in the wrong place. They're not thinking about the truth. They're not worried about the truth. They don't really care. They're only for self-advancement. You see that all around. It's about how much money they can make, or how popular they can get, or how many hits. And guess who they sell out to? What is really most sinister about the careers of many of these people are the way they support Russia and the way they support our enemies and the way our enemies, I think, have supported them. Look at the
Yeah.
offers to Alex Jones, for example, by the Russians. Oh, come over here and podcast. How much
Yeah.
money has gone? We know that some of these podcasters, some have been caught taking money from the Russians. I think it's probably a much more serious situation than we realize.
Yeah.
You're
I listened
talking
to
about subversion.
I listened to a clip or watched a clip. This is like one of the comedians that became more widely known through his friendship or association with Joe Rogan. I think this was Tim Dillon, right? So he's like this chubby comedian, very funny guy. But now he wants to talk about the political topics. He wants to talk about what really matters. He just doesn't want to make some jokes. And so he's talking about some very serious things, and he doesn't really know anything about them really. And so with this kind of a landscape, you have to ask yourself, this person basically is sitting there wearing funny glasses and being all passive aggressive, because we're all angry, angry about everything. And he wants to be moral. He wants to be the good guy, who says it like it is. But you have to ask yourself, with each and every one of them, how far would they actually go with their heroics? And I think with most of them, they could not fathom having a regular job. They would not ever try to live a normal life and go to work for some company. They just want to make all their money and significant money through this unprofessional talk. So I'm listening to these guys and like, oh, I'm saying it like it is. I'm heroic for saying things, saying these things. But I'm questioning: would this person give up his party lifestyle? Would this person give up his funny job, or would he sell out to whomever to keep that position? How heroic are these people really? I mean, we've seen that with Alex Jones, who always said that he's a superhero. He's sacrificed so much, and he's taken the biggest risks. But when he was held accountable with the Sandy Hook lawsuits, it was all just no. I'm not a journalist. I'm just hiding behind free speech, and this is all just I have zero accountability. I have zero responsibility, I don't see why I broke the law here. And now it's all about setting up a new website and finding new money and finding a new construct so he can make money again and he can retire at some point. He needs a few good years. I don't know, stash away money so where the Sandy Hook lawyers cannot find it, and then retire or go to Russia or retire in Russia and live out his life and buy himself some new Rolex watches, because I think he had to sell some of the watches that he had or buy some new cars, and he'll be fine, he thinks. And I think that goes with a lot of these creatures. When Tucker Carlson bought a house in a foreign country and he can stash money somewhere, there's always an exit plan. Oh, I'm so brave. I'm talking to this former CIA guy, this John Kiriakou or whatever his name is, who's close with the Russians, and I'm having Russell Brand on, and I'm interviewing all the same guys you've seen 100 times before. I'm so brave, talking into a camera, trashing Israel for everything, he was interviewing like super far right guys in the past. I'm so brave. I'm so super brave, but I can escape on a moment's notice. At the drop of a hat, I can just be out of here and have my millions and live happily ever after. That's how brave they are.
There is something called responsibility, which I don't know. You I thought for many years I wanted to study, just read books and understand and try to understand, because before I would write anything, I wanted to know something. I wanted to at least have questions and say, I think this, where am I wrong? What did I get wrong? Here's my sources. What can you say about it? But no, Tucker Carlson, I mean, he's a guy who Peck types. He's a journalist that can't type. He can't. He didn't. He wouldn't take a typing course. I don't understand. That's part of your job, is to know how to type. That he's dyslexic. That he didn't do good in college. That he doesn't read.
Yeah,
How can you
yeah.
be a writer and a journalist when you don't read? You can't write books or write anything intelligible unless you're skilled as a reader as well. And about interpreting, I mean, it's like you should have been a plumber or something else. I mean, you can make good money, you do a good service for people, but this is not a service, and it's irresponsible. I don't understand. It's the same thing. Marjorie Taylor Greene running for Congress, is she to be compared with Alexander Hamilton? Or other members of Congress and other illustrious representatives? I mean, to what standard is she held in herself, in her own mind? She doesn't know anything. I think she's right. Close your eyes and just take a blind shot in the dark and see if you hit something. I mean, even a broken watch is right twice a day, right? So, where did she come off? And you can agree with her or disagree with her on different points, but it's completely random whether she comes to the right conclusion on anything. She's completely unknowledgeable. She knows no history, not even recent history. She doesn't understand politics or economics, and yet she's deeply invested in it. Same thing with Candace Owen, and the same thing, all these people. I mean, Candace Owen, I think somebody said about her, she was good as long as she was able to read from the cue cards, right? But the minute she was on her own, she was in trouble. I mean, this is how many of these
Yeah,
people
she
are. They're
fumbles. Yeah,
fraudulent.
she fumbles continuously. Fumbles some fairly
Yeah.
basic words and terms, and
I
people
mean,
have
these
made
people
fun of
aren't
her.
educated. Yeah,
People make
it
fun of
used
her
to
for
be,
that.
look, you to lead people, this goes back to Hesiod, and I've said it, and I will keep repeating it. There's three kinds of people, Hesiod said. There's those who can think and lead. There's those who will recognize and follow those who can think and lead. And there's those that won't follow those who can think and lead and can't think and lead themselves. And now we have a whole regime based on the third type, what Hesiod called the useless men, who can't think, who can't follow those, who won't follow those who can, and who are completely useless. And they claim to have the answers, and they're leading us now. This is a catastrophe. This is the core catastrophe. It's been said that evil people are dangerous. Of course, we know, but to be successful as an evil person, you have to have a lot of rationality. You have to have a lot of understanding. And so that keeps evil in sort of a certain lane. But when you're stupid, when you're radically stupid, as I think Eric Verglin would call them, radically stupid people, they can do much more damage than evil people. Evil people, they've got the bad intentions and they want to do certain things, but they realize, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This will kill me too. But these people that are radically stupid, they'll go over the cliff. They'll take everybody with them. They'll say the darndest things and do the darndest things. And we see with President Trump, it's not 3D chess. He's an ignoramus. He's an egomaniac. He's a narcissist, and he doesn't know what he's doing. And he's seriously damaging us every day. Whereas these evil Democrats, at least there would be a limit to the damage they do because they didn't want to commit suicide. That's my analysis right now. In the race to the bottom, now America's, it's a question. Was Russia going to hit bottom first, or China? Now America might hit bottom first thanks to Trump. Trump can bungle in ways that no enemy could ever do us in, but he could do us in rather quickly. And so that would be my little rant for today.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in the near future, I'm going to do a systematic breakdown of the American leading class of the last 200 something years. going from the some of the old money dynasties and how this all
There's a
worked.
great book that touches on this, by the way, by Andrei Navrazov called The Gingerbread Race, in which he basically uses
Gingerbread.
he had taken over the Yale Literary Magazine back in the 1980s, and Yale went to take it back from him. Now he's a refugee from the Soviet Union. I knew his dad too. They left there when he was I don't know, a sophomore or senior in high school. Uh, a junior or senior in high school. He went to prep school and then he went to Yale. But what what he says in the gingerbread race is he says these Western elites, they're all frat boys and they never quite grow up. And there's a lack of maturity and a lack of intellectual maturity. And they've got a lock on. It's sort of like a groupthink, good old boy system, now good old girls too, that is really rather toxic to the truth and to intellectual. And because the West, we had all this money and we had all this technology, we were the gingerbread man. You know the story of the gingerbread man?
Yeah, you told that before.
It's do you have that in Germany? Run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. You know, he's very sweet, the gingerbread man. He's made out of gingerbread, and he's running away, of course, and he's got to cross a river, right? And so the fox says, "Hey, I'll carry you across a river on my nose." And the man goes, "Great." You know, because run, run as fast as you can. You can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man. Well, of course, he's on the fox's nose and the fox is swimming across the river. You know what happens to gingerbread when it gets wet? He can't get wet. And so midway across the river, the fox just opens his mouth, gulp, and eats the gingerbread man. Goodbye, gingerbread man. Well, this is the parable that Navrazov uses. These people, they think they are immune. They think they're faster than anything, faster than blasphemy, and they can go anywhere they want and do anything because they're faster than anything.
Yeah.
But the fact is, they've climbed on the nose of the fox, Russia, China, whatever, and now, of course, they're going to get eaten because they're just too damn dumb.
Yeah. So this is one of my next projects, because I think it's never been done in a way that would satisfy me, because I think that when different people from different political camps, when they try to explain the American leading class, they will always stop at some point, because their own ideology will always give them boundaries, and they will stop and just give parts of the presentation, or they would just not go in some places. So it's never really been done. I think it's never really been done that properly, even though people make assumptions and they say, well, the American leadership is such and such and works in that way, and that this is why we have to do X, Y, and Z now. But this is something so fundamental. We need to understand the fabric of the American leading class. We have to understand who they are and how they function and how they build their systems. But nobody's, I think, quite done it so far.
No, well, it's complicated. All right. Well, thank you, Alex, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. This has been Friends and Enemies. I'm Jeff Nyquist in the United States. My co-host has been Alex Benesch, and I hope you'll join us next week for another edition of Friends and Enemies.